and even allowing for personnel. I mean, it shouldn't be this bad. And I mean, I have to say, up until a few months ago, I was probably thinking that there are enough caveats and issues around United that it's unfair to kind of judge Ten Hag, especially how the first season had gone, where they won a trophy, they had a good 3-month spell. Whereas right now, if Ineos do change manager in the summer, as we expect, it'd be very hard to criticise that decision.
Look, in terms of players on the pitch, I mean, not subjectivity, I don't think, because Jamie Redknapp was talking after the game and he felt that, he felt some of the players just aren't pulling the weight. He also felt that Bruno Fernandes was kind of the only positivity. But he mentioned Casemiro and he said that he felt he was his words, playing in soccer aid, sort of waiting for the celebrity to come on and do the business, sort of that sort of attitude to the game. Do you feel that there's players there just not pulling their weight?
Well, it's a good line because I suppose you can interpret it a few different ways.
You can.
Soccer aid will be delighted as well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I suppose, I mean, look, Casemiro, we're talking about one of the best midfielders of the last decade, but that's what it is, the last decade. And as brilliant as he'd been last season, let's not forget, when United signed him, they wanted Frankie de Jong. He's a different profile of midfielder to de Jong. And there was almost this sense that, it was an element. I mean, although it worked out last year, it was kind of a bit of a panicked signing that had become typical United at the time. And it's why one of the biggest things that, beyond the manager, one of the biggest areas of focus for Ineos, now that they finally get control of football, is recruitment. And how United get into these situations where they pay so much for a player who potentially has only a year or two at his best. I mean, because people were aware of injury issues at Madrid. Even in his last season with Madrid, Ancelotti had actually adapted how they play because he realised that Casemiro couldn't cover the ground he used, so that was a factor in that, as well as a few others, to be fair. But it was, Madrid knew about this.
And it's quite striking that Madrid are clear at the top of La Liga in Spain. Had he still been there, he wouldn't be anywhere near the side.
No, well, exactly, because they've completely changed model as well, in response to a few different kind of elements in the market these days. But they've pivoted to a much younger squad. And I suppose for Madrid, it's a little bit like Saudi Arabia, or the Saudi Pro League, say, with Chelsea, taking some of their players that didn't want off them. There's been a bit of that with like Madrid and Manchester United. But we want to go towards the younger squad here to take some of the players that used to do a job for us.
And yesterday, Erik ten Hag talked about the youngsters not doing so well as well. Certainly after the match, he sort of alluded to that. He also, in his press conference, he was actually quite upset by being provoked, he felt, in terms of talking about them potentially having their worst ever finish if they finish 7th and below. Let's just see what happened in the press conference.
Erik, there's a danger you could get caught in 7th place. If you fall below 7th, that would be the worst finish in Premier League history for United. Do you think you're going to be above?
I don't want to take that question. It's not. That is not important.
I mean, he said he doesn't want to take the question. It shows really the pressure that he's currently under, Darren, because he every week he's facing the media, and it's something negative that they're talking about. Is it fair?
Yeah, absolutely, it's fair. Okay. I mean, you're the manager of Manchester United. The numbers suggest you're on course for your worst Premier League finish ever. The question is entirely legitimate. The guys out there, it's their job to ask the questions that fans want the answers to, that we want the answers to sitting here. And when you look at the evidence of your own eyes and you see how many individuals within the team are underperforming, the easy thing for the journalists to do would be to go in and point to positives, because managers love it when you have what they describe as positive questions. Why don't you ask me this or that? That's not a journalist's job. Our job is to go in and ask those questions, and those guys do a terrific job. I have to say, they're our colleagues, and I think in moments like this, when it's tricky and tempers, we've seen many occasions where in press conferences, managers attack the questioner and deride the questioner for actually bringing up the elephant in the room. But in this moment, where Manchester United are, where they've fallen, and a number of the match reports today highlight the extent to which they've regressed under Ten Hag, questions like that, it's all the more important that they're asked, so that we can actually get some level of accountability from the person whose job it is to improve the players, improve the team, improve the culture, improve the level of performance, so that there is the kind of minimum level that you have at Arsenal, that you have at City, that you have at Liverpool, that you have at Spurs and Villa, which is why they are in contention for Champions League football. You're not getting that from Ten Hag. The easy thing to do would be to look on the bright side, but the journalist's job is to ask the tough questions.
Yeah, and it's never easy, I have to say, to ask those questions, particularly post-match as well. He'd already come out and he'd already alluded to individual errors cost them that game, really, he said. And after the game, there was kind of tweets and social media going around from Garnacho and Amad Diallo. What do we read into them? Because there was a kind of closed, zipped mouth from Amad Diallo. There's a Garnacho one as well. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it bodes well for Ten Hag for two reasons. The most positive aspects of Manchester United's performance, a glimmer of hope, if you like, has been the fact that the young players have played so well throughout this season. You see the passion and the exuberance that they play with, the moments of brilliance from the likes of Diallo, who struck late in the Liverpool game, Garnacho, whose goals really have seen him come of age and give reason to be optimistic.
Kobbie
Mainoo, obviously, with those two fabulous goals that he scored so far. So when the younger players appear, and I have to use the word appear because they're not here to speak for themselves, and I'm sure they will in due course speak for themselves, to be showing signs of frustration and the interpretation, and again, I'm being careful with my language, but the interpretation of what they've put on social media would suggest, or what they've liked on social media, in his case, Garnacho's case, suggests that there is a level of dissatisfaction, which would be a real shame because he's invested in these young players and they are the future of Manchester United, and they would serve, if it turns out to be the case that they are dissatisfied, that could be a final nail in the coffin for him.
We've seen it happen, haven't we, with Jadon Sancho? That didn't end well.
Well, I mean, and like, it's amazing, even when we were speaking earlier on about this, it's amazing United are going through this again. I think 2 years ago, having had that chaos of the way the 21-22 season ended, which then, of course, brought Ten Hag in. And I suppose, stories like this, what they speak to is, and again, it comes down to interpretation, but we'll say Chris Wheeler had a report in the Daily Mail 2 months ago about how the players, or a lot of the players in the dressing room now, expect Ten Hag to leave. But, of course, maybe they didn't know it at that point, whereas suddenly it adds to this feeling that he doesn't really have kind of a secure hold over the dressing room anymore. That's what these sort of stories usually point to. And then once that happens, then that feeds onto the pitch, because if players know that a manager, ultimately it's an erosion of authority, because they know that his control doesn't mean as much anymore, especially if he himself is going to go in the summer.
I think that's the key word, authority, because if at clubs where there is discipline and a level of authority, you don't get ambiguous tweets. You don't get social media activity that allows us in our profession, and even broadcast, to look at and say, what is he saying there? There should not be any ambiguity. I look at Thiago Silva and the social media activity around him at Chelsea, and the fact that he's not been in the side on a regular basis since that particular story. And at the top clubs, it doesn't happen, it shouldn't happen, but it is happening with Manchester United at the moment. Now, again, to be fair to the individuals concerned, they may come out and say, look, this is not what we intended.
Yes.
Yeah. We intended to say something different. So obviously it's up in the air. But my point is that at clubs where the manager has a tight hold on discipline, there isn't that ambiguity. There aren't those questions. You don't have those expressions, if you like, that have been interpreted. I use that word, interpreted, as dissatisfaction.
What are the papers saying about the situation there?
So much on the papers this morning. Back page of the Mirror, let's start with them, because I think it articulates what everybody felt about yesterday's game. Lucky Devils, look at the subdeck there as well. Fernandes and VAR late in the game save the day as the cracks get bigger for Ten Hag, and he's obliged with that head in a hands shot that everyone has picked up on today. Harry Pratt was at the game, the great Harry Pratt, and
it was Harry that asked the question as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Harry gets stuck in there, as he has done for many a year. I want to take you as well to the Mail on Sunday as well, because you mentioned Chris Wheeler, Miguel, and his match report is terrific from yesterday, asks all the right questions and makes the right points as well. I want to read you a tiny bit as well. You can see the subdeck and the headline there, but I'll just read you a tiny bit as well, because he says, when United's new co-owners Ineos sit down to decide Ten Hag's fate, they won't be too worried about the chasm between the club and the Premier League's top three. Even missing out on the Champions League might not prompt the sacking of their Dutch manager. But when they think about days like these, days when United were outclassed by Bournemouth, that might be a different matter. Not once but twice this season, Bournemouth came away from Old Trafford with a well-deserved 3-0 victory in December, and they would have not have been remotely flattered by a similar winning margin yesterday at the Vitality. Ten Hag said his players would have to learn from that previous experience, but once again, United didn't play like they were listening to him. Once again, they didn't seem to be playing to a game plan either.